Hello and welcome to the program. I am Deji Badimasi. Now, as the federal government of Nigeria is scaling up efforts to get COVID-19 vaccines delivered to the country, quite a number of Nigerians are opposed to taking it. Again, the issue of rejecting vaccines takes Nigeria down memory lane. In the wake of the polio outbreak in the early 90s, health officials also witnessed a strong resistance to the polio vaccine, stirred by fears and conspiracy theories that it could be contaminated and render people sterile. But eventually, we scaled through, and the country is now polio-free after years of continuous enlightenment and education about the polio vaccine. Now, with a similar situation rearing its head with the coronavirus pandemic and given the current complexities of today's world, how will the government drive the campaign of reorientation to allay fears of citizens? Joining me now on the program is Dr.T Funsho, who is the chair, Rotary's Nigeria National Polio Plus Committee. Dr. Funsho was also named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world last year in honor of his contribution to polio eradication in Africa. Doc, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and thank you very much for your time. Let me start by asking you this. All things being equal, Nigeria hopes to receive about 100,000 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine by the end of this month. We understand it's the Pfizer vaccine. What's your take on that?
Well, that is still a promise. It is an exciting time that at least we have an additional tool in our arsenal to fight the deadly COVID-19 virus. But it's just, an additional tool. As it is now, the vaccine is just a promise. I want to emphasize that I'm very much in favor of vaccine, but at the same time, I will caution against putting all our eggs in one basket. Just assuming that if the vaccine comes, all the COVID-19 woes, will be away, in a jiffy. That is not going to be the case. Particularly in our own climate where we don't have the guarantee of having enough vaccines to vaccinate all Nigerians in the first year. The best we have from the government is that we'll have enough vaccines to vaccinate about 40 million people or thereabouts in this year, and hopefully, have an additional number in 2022. That will not be enough for this year to stop transmission or to attain what we call herd immunity. So we need to prepare for vaccine. We need to get people to accept vaccines for the long-term solution to this COVID pandemic. But at the same time, we need to continue preaching for people to do the things we already have that we know works, that costs nothing, which is basically, to keep safe distance in case, either ourselves or whoever we meet may be asymptomatic carriers. That is by wearing masks. Even with masks, you still need to keep a safe distance because you never can tell. And also to make sure that you keep to good hand hygiene, wash your hands regularly. In the absence of soap and water, use hand sanitizers. And if you can afford to, just stay at home, particularly when we're having this major scourge that is, getting our numbers to way more than 1,000 a day in the country. So we need the vaccines, but we need to bear in mind that it's much more of a long-term solution rather than a short-term solution.
Now, how important is it to secure this vaccine, and how potent do you think it could be in the fight against COVID-19, especially with a country like Nigeria?
Well, vaccines, have been, major game changers in fighting diseases for a long time, almost a century now, from the crude form of the smallpox, vaccine to the much more modern forms of vaccines which are injectable, and in the case of polio, the oral polio vaccine. People who are in doubt, should realize, that we have been able to reduce infant and childhood mortality in the last 20 years by almost 50 to 60%, particularly in Nigeria. And that is basically due to the introduction of vaccines. Vaccines are efficient, they are safe, and what underscored that safety is, if you're talking about the COVID-19 virus, the COVID-19 vaccine, if you recall, we started with about 160 candidates. Those are, vaccines that were in development. Along the line, a lot of those, have, fallen by the wayside because they did not meet stringent standards, for vaccine. As I speak, we have only 10 vaccines that have actually been approved, and all of them have been emergency, licensing, such that if anything goes wrong, they can be withdrawn. As a matter of fact, one has been withdrawn already out of the 11 that were initially licensed. And then we have about other 60 to 70 vaccines that are in different stage, of clinical trial, either in stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 clinical trials. It is so rigorous. And the reason for that is, number one, to demonstrate that they are efficient. In other words, they will protect against COVID-19. And number two, that they cause very little or no harm. So vaccines are, are very, very rigorously monitored to make sure that they are efficient and also that they cause very little or no harm at all.
Now let's talk about this challenge of getting people to receive the vaccine, because it's actually nothing new. I mean, you experienced it during the polio campaign in the quest to eradicate polio in this country. So for you now, what would you say was the key driver to the vaccine resistance back then? I'm talking about polio now. And what do you think, what lessons do you think we can actually pick from that experience now and deploy in tackling the current experience we have at the moment with the polio, with the COVID-19 vaccine?
I believe most of it, not all, most of it stems from a lack of understanding of what vaccines are and what they do, and some of the processes that is required to develop vaccines. We had this difficulty with polio immunization around about 2001, 2002, 2003. And all it required was for us to mount a massive campaign of enlightening people, of showing them evidence that the vaccine, causes no harm. It doesn't contain any injurious elements for people to come around. And as soon as we were able to convince both political leaders, religious and traditional leaders in particular, of the efficacy, but more importantly, the safety of this vaccine, the road to full immunization with polio, became much, much easier. And that is, partially what led us to the final eradication of the wild polio virus from Nigeria about 3 years ago.
No doubt there's a huge task ahead for the government. How challenging do you think this will be? Because to be candid, the number of people who are saying they're not going to take the vaccine is actually growing.
The solution to a problem begins with identifying the problem. I think, with our experience with, polio eradication, we realize that there's a need for mass about the need to have this vaccination done to ourselves and the population at large, to make them appreciate some of the processes that's required to produce this vaccine. It is very unlikely, that an organization like WHO will license a vaccine that is injurious.
Lastly, now, I know you've talked about advocacy campaigns, and with all the conspiracy theories flying about, you will agree that there's a whole lot of convincing to do. But What other measures can we take to address this issue?
I think, we need you, the media, at all levels, both the electronic media and the print media, to play a very major role in this. During the height of our polio campaigns to win the hearts and minds of the population, we have journalists against polio. A way, to assist, to get the information out to people that it is very, very important to vaccinate the children against polio, that the vaccine is safe, the vaccine is free, as we expect it to be in the case of, COVID. We also need to buy in leadership. To a larger extent, the traditional leaders in this country, and to some extent religious leaders, were the game changers in getting acceptability of the vaccine across the country at every level, so that we were able to quickly raise the number of children who are immunized against the wild polio virus through immunization, because they were involved at every stage, both at the highest echelons of the traditional leadership up to the world level, where we have the traditional leadership at the very, very world level. And sometimes they do support us, they do accompany us when we do our house-to-house campaigns to reassure people who are in doubt as to whether they should take the vaccine or not. And that in no small way has helped us to reach, the no case of wild polio virus in Nigeria since 2016.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tunji Funsho, for your time. Dr. Tunji Funsho there, he is the chair of Rotaries Nigeria's National Polio Plus Committee. And of course, one of Time's 100 most influential people last year because of his contributions in the eradication of polio across Africa. We'll take a break now and we'll be right back. On Digi 360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.